Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Louisiana SADD's virtual press conference, Speak Up, Slow Down. My name is Dylan Ivey, Louisiana SADD State Coordinator. Nationwide, more than 8,300 people died in crashes involving teen drivers from 2008 to 2018, during the time period between Memorial Day and Labor Day, known as the 100 deadliest days. That's more than 7 people a day each summer. And to combat this deadly time for teens, SADD has launched a virtual campaign called Super Safe Summer, with relevant information and content being posted each day that promotes safe driving. This week's focus is speeding. Speeding is one of the top 3 factors in fatal injury crashes involving teens. Today, we bring you a virtual event in the form of a press conference for an opportunity to hear from a law enforcement officer, a victim, and a youth advocate. It is our hope that this event will empower teens to speak up and slow down. First up, we're going to hear from Trooper Taylor Scrantz. Taylor serves Troop A as a public information officer in the Public Affairs Division for the Louisiana State Police. PIOs serve as the official spokespeople for state police and offer various programs targeted at educating children, parents, and the general public. Law enforcement programming fosters positive relationships with local communities and has demonstrated that troopers do much more than merely enforce traffic and criminal laws. At this time, please welcome Trooper Scrantz.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Trooper First Class Taylor Scrantz. I'm the Public Information Officer for Troop A in the Baton Rouge area. We cover the 9 surrounding parishes. Thank you, Dylan, for having state police involved in today's event. In the Troop A area alone this year, and we haven't even made 1 year yet, we've already investigated 40 fatality crashes. That's claimed the life of 44 people, and one of the main factors in those fatality crashes is speeding. Along with speeding, we see impaired driving, and understrained drivers and passengers get killed as well. So when you add speeding on top of that, you see a lot of ejections from the vehicle. And once you get ejected from the vehicle, it's very hard to survive it. That's why that seatbelt is put into place, and that's also why we have speed limits on our state highways and our interstates. So one of the things that state police is doing now to deter speeding is we do a lot of checkpoints where we sit on the side of the road with radars and lidars like the laser you see us use. And that's one of the things that we're doing. We don't enjoy writing speeding tickets, but we have to educate the public on the dangers of speeding. We're not out there to ruin anyone's day. We're out there to ensure that everyone is safe upon the roadways. Another sad part of that is last week alone, we investigated 3 fatality crashes, and the 3 victims were all under 18 years old. So that's one thing that we're seeing, passengers being unrestrained and the people actually driving are speeding. So, like I said, state police's mission is to ensure the safety of the motoring public. We can't thank SADD, organizations like SADD, enough for our partnerships that we have. I think everyone's main goals, includes the motoring public, is to stay safe on our highways. Anything that state police can do for y'all, we're always there to help y'all. And for anybody traveling through our state in Louisiana, if you see a hazardous moving violation or a reckless driver, we encourage you to dial *577 *LSP. And we can dispatch a trooper to your nearest area to help you. Thank you.
Taylor, thank you so much for sharing that information with us. Very valuable information. Next, we have Mr. Bubba Fletcher, Program Director for Think First. Think First of the ARC-LaTex is the state chapter of the Think First National Injury Prevention Foundation. Think First's mission is to prevent brain, spinal cord, and other traumatic injuries through education, research, and advocacy. Bubba's passion for preventing injuries is attributed to his personal story, which involves a crash that forever changed his life on July 14, 2007. Here to share his story with you today is Mr. Bubba Fletcher.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dylan, for having me today. To really jump right into my story, I had gotten married on May the 19th after dating for almost 7 years. And we had a nice, big, beautiful ceremony and celebrated together with family and friends. And about 8 weeks after we were married, my wife decided to go over and visit her family and hang out with them for a little bit. And so I was left unsupervised And I decided I was going to go hang out with some friends, no big deal. So went over to my buddy's house and hung out with them for a little bit and had a couple drinks, and I knew I had to work the next day. So I went ahead and hopped on the highway and was headed home. And on the way home, another friend of mine called me and asked me if I'd stop and hang out with him for a little bit. I said, okay. I hadn't seen him in a while, so I stopped by and was hanging out with him, and it got to be about 11:30, and I knew I had to be up at 6 o'clock to go to work. So I was like, man, I got to hurry up and get home and get to bed. So I left there. I was headed on the road, getting onto the entrance ramp to the interstate, was going way too fast. I was in a hurry to get home, and get to bed, was going too fast, lost control, went off of the entrance ramp down into the ditch. When I hit in the ditch, my truck started rolling. The second or third row, I was ejected out of the driver's side window, and the fifth row, the truck caught up with me and rolled back over me. And that's when I have to assure you it's only by grace that I'm here to tell my story today. Because first and foremost, thankfully, nobody else was involved in the crash, but nobody saw it either. There were some firemen down the road a ways filling out a report from a call they had been on, and they just happened to have their window down, and so they heard my truck rolling, and they knew what it was right away. So they dispatched everybody on the scene quick. They got there, they found the truck. The medics were the first ones to find me, and I would actually go back months later and thank those guys for the job that they had done. And needless to say, they were pretty shocked to see me, because when they found me, I was dead on the scene. You see, when I hit the ground and the truck hit me, the vertebrae in my lower back compressed so hard, it severed my spinal cord completely. And then I broke all the ribs down the left-hand side and collapsed both lungs. That's why I have this nice indentation here at the base of my throat. That's where they trached me to start breathing for me. They got me lifted to LSU, where we got a top-notch level 1 trauma unit here in Shreveport, and they went to work on me. They knew right away from the scans I was a spinal cord injury. They wasn't real sure about the brain. I was severe concussion. I was non-responsive. So you see, this is where I got to find out how selfish I was, because, I never thought anything was going to happen to me, right? But I definitely never took the time to stop and think about how my choices could affect other people. So here's my wife of only 8 weeks. She tries calling me that night, telling me she loves me and good night. She can't get me. She figures I'm asleep. She tries calling me the next morning, still can't get me. She calls my work. They tell her I didn't show up. She knows something's wrong now. So she starts calling around. Friends and stuff had said they seen me the night before, and that was it. So my family's all involved. My mom's calling hospitals. She finds me at LSU about noon that Saturday. So this is 12 hours later. All they can tell her is there is somebody there by my name, still in critical care, still in the trauma unit. So where it really hits home for me now is when I make that ride with my wife to go see her family. Because then I try to put myself in her position. How could she even focus on that hour-and-a-half drive with all the anxiety and fear of not knowing if her husband of only 8 weeks was even going to be still alive by the time she got there? But she got there. They got to get with the doctors. They knew I was a spinal cord injury, still wasn't sure about the brain. And so they didn't know if I would survive. So for the next month, I put my family through a trauma that I could never imagine. You see, it was easy for me. I was in a coma. They're the ones that had to spend each day coming up to that ICU in the limited visiting hours, seeing me in there on those machines that are breathing for me, that are feeding me, that are supposed to be life-sustaining. And at times, even those machines weren't enough. They were telling me about times they would be there and I'd start to code. The crash team would work on me. And yet they had to experience this and still had to go on with their everyday lives. They still had to go to work every day. had to take care of things around the house, watering the plants, feeding the animals, had to get rest at night and everything, but still have it in the back of their mind. They could get that call at any minute, letting them know I'm not there anymore. So that's why I know nothing broke my heart more than to find out that my wife of only 8 weeks cried herself to sleep every night for a month because she didn't know if I would still be there when she woke up in the morning. So I can only imagine the fear and terror she felt when she seen her phone ringing at 3 o'clock in the morning and it was LSU's ICU, and how I'm sure she didn't want to answer that phone call. But she did, and thankfully it was a good call. I was waking up. And for me, it was just like waking up the next day. The last thing, I remember was hanging out with some friends, and so here I am, you start to become a little coherent. You start to hear things, so I could hear the ventilator that's pumping around me. I could hear the machines that are beeping. I open my eyes. I see I've got tubes in my nose, my mouth, my throat. I've got lines all in my arms and legs. And so I know something serious has happened. I just don't know what. So I'm like, okay, I just need to sit up in the bed and figure out what's going on. And when I try to go to do that, I can't move. And my body was numb, and it's that tingling sensation like when your hands or your feet go to sleep. So I figure, okay, I've just been laid up. I need to wake my body up. So I start shaking my legs and beating on my body and stuff. And there's always one nurse there in the ICU watching you. So she comes in with another nurse. They kind of restrain me. They can tell I'm kind of distraught. I'm nonverbal. I can't communicate. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And the doctor comes in with them, and he tells me, son, you're paralyzed. You'll never walk again. And that was a heck of a way to wake up, The last thing I remember was just hanging out with some friends. I was headed home. So from there, I got transferred out of ICU. That's how I celebrated my 30th birthday. That's how I marked that milestone in my life. I got transferred out of ICU. But I guarantee you, every year now I celebrate that birthday, I celebrate another year being transferred out of ICU. Because I know so many people don't make it out of there alive. I experienced the guy in the room next to me dying from a motorcycle wreck. I heard the cries and screams of his family in the waiting room when they told him. So I am grateful that I did make it out of ICU. From there, I had to learn to be a 30-year-old infant. I went into the rehab hospital where I had to learn to try to dress myself and bathe myself and feed myself and do all these things that seem really basic. But I have to tell you, my first achievement was lifting a 1-pound weight 10 times. Because not only due to my injuries, but laid up in ICU, eating through a tube for a month, I lost 45 pounds. So I was very weak. So I was completely dependent on, when my family wasn't there, I was dependent on the nurses, the techs, the therapists, the aides to make, to help me do all these very personal and intimate things that I couldn't do for myself. So I was there a month before my insurance company said it was time for me to go home. My wife had our home modified, ramps put in, doorways widened, everything. They cut the legs off of my bed so that it sat down low enough to where I could kind of fall over onto it and drag myself up into the bed. And so, you would think coming home should be a great memory, right? It's a homecoming. Your family and friends, everybody's there to welcome you home. Well, my homecoming for me was a reality check. You see, my first memory of coming home is rolling in through the entryway, rolling about halfway across the living room and not being able to push myself any further because the carpet felt so thick and I was so weak. That's when I realized that this was not something that I was going to get over, that this was not something that I was going to get past, that this was now going to be my life. And I was going to be dependent on somebody to help take care of me for the rest of my life. So now I was home. My mom just happened to get laid off when I was in ICU, and she was a nurse. So she was able to come home and take care of me. And I hate that I put that burden on my mother, but I know that she would do it again for me anytime. But I know how hard it must have been for her to have to see her child in that position, that she was having to take care of him as like a 30-year-old child, to help dress him and bathe him and feed him and, load him up to take him to doctor's appointments and therapy appointments and all that. And so, I'm glad it was my mom, don't get me wrong, instead of some stranger. That made it more comfortable for me, but I hate what I did to her. And so, going through therapy and everything gave me a lot of time to think. Because, I'd kind of given in to the excuses some of my friends had given me at first in the hospital when they were trying to make me feel better. Like, man, I think there was some gravel there on that median, on that entrance ramp. You probably hit that, that's probably why you lost control. Or, you know what, man, I'm sure it started to lightly rain about that time that night, and it was the summer. The road was probably slick, right? But that was all bull. Those were excuses. This was not an accident. This didn't just happen to me. I made choices. I chose to drink and get behind the wheel. I chose not to reach over and click that seatbelt. I chose to speed to try to get home in a hurry because I thought nothing could happen to me, right? But I didn't realize on that night, July 14th, I was making the choice to never be able to walk again. I was making the choice to never be able to dance with my wife again. The videos from our wedding night's the last time I get to see myself dancing with my wife. And it just destroys me anytime I hear that song come on, because I know I'll never be in that moment again. I made the choice to not be able to walk my daughter down the aisle when she gets married, or to dance with her at her wedding. I made the choice to not be able to teach my sons how to tackle in football, or how to steal second base in baseball, or how to kick a soccer ball or a football. All because of the choices I made that changed their life forever. Because I thought nothing could happen to me, right? That happens to somebody else. I've done this plenty of times, I probably sped most places that I went. Never really wore the seatbelt, I remember my mom telling me to put it on, and when I'd get down the road, I'd unclick it and throw it off. Didn't think I needed it. But I have to tell you, I know that I survived with a purpose. Because like the officer stated earlier, most people don't survive being ejected from a vehicle. They told me my survival rate was 5%. You're looking at 5% in front of you today. That's nothing short of a miracle. Because I was 95% away from not being here today. 95% away from not being able to see my family again and tell them I love them. 95% away from being another cross on the side of the road. Is that really how I wanted to be remembered? Is that the legacy I wanted to leave behind? Oh, look, there's where he was killed from poor choices he made. Is that how I wanted to leave this life? I was 95% away from not being able to share my story with you today. So imagine how many stories you don't get to hear. So know that your choices are important. Okay? Know that that seatbelt is important. Know that those speed limits are important. They're there for a reason. They're there to help save your life. So please, make smarter choices. Don't end up like me. Don't put your family through what I put my family through. please just simply stop and take the time to think first. Thank you.
Bubba, we really appreciate your willingness to share your story with all of us today. I mean, wow, what an impactful story that is that you have to share. You've truly found a way to turn a tragedy into a triumph by educating and inspiring all of us to be better drivers. Thank you so much. Next, we have Catherine Douglas, an incoming senior at Walker High School. Catherine serves on SADD National's Student Leadership Council and volunteers with Text Less, Live More on their student engagement board. In August, Catherine will begin her 4th year serving as a youth advocate for Louisiana SADD, and we are so excited to have her with us today. She will be sharing with you a few words in our call to action for young drivers across our state and country. Take it away, Catherine.
And thank you so much for sharing your story, Mr. Bubba. I know for me, your story opens my eyes to how one or multiple destructive decisions can change your life in an instant. I hope others see the dangers and realize that that one drink or that one text or that one distraction will not only affect them individually, but there's always a ripple effect to every decision that we make. With that said, nowadays teenagers are at the most risk, not only for their lives, but others as well. When it comes to either partying, hanging out with the wrong crowd, or reckless driving, teenagers are not only putting themselves at the most risk of getting in a crash, but other drivers. It is statistically proven the more passengers that are in a car, the more likely they are going to get in a crash. Teenagers believe they are invincible because they always have that notion in their head, it won't happen to me. But they do not think about the bigger picture of it could happen to me. And if it does, then who will be affected? Which brings me to my next point, parents. Parents, research continues to prove that your influence has a great influential impact on your teen. I want you to consider your driving behavior on a regular basis and think about these few things. Are you and your passengers wearing a seatbelt? How loud is the radio? And are you and your passengers behaving like responsible drivers and responsible passengers are supposed to? These 3 questions correlate with some of the biggest factors for fatal injury crashes. If a person is not wearing their seatbelt, they can be ejected from their seat. Speeding increases the distance in which you land. If the radio is too loud in the car, it can cause the driver to speed up and become more distracted. If the driver and our passengers are not behaving responsibly, whether it's texting, horseplay, drinking, and or eating, then the driver is not focused on the speed limit, and usually their speed will tend to gradually increase. So parents, remember, monkey see, monkey do. Your driver will model your behaviors behind the wheel. Speeding is a dangerous driving behavior that is often overlooked. In 2018, speeding was a factor in 26% of all fatalities on traffic, killing 9,378 people, or an average of 25 people per day. Speeding can be a gateway behavior that leads to more destructive decisions and reckless driving behind the wheel. Speeding leads to carelessness. Carelessness leads to reckless driving, and reckless driving leads to catastrophe. So my question is not only for parents and adults, but teenagers as well. Why do we allow such a simple act that is often overlooked to cause a chain of destructive decisions that lead to tragedy? It's illegal, but why do we as a society think it's okay as long as we don't get caught or don't get a ticket? Because it's not okay. It's extremely dangerous. Young drivers think about the coolness and independence of driving, but they often forget that driving is a huge responsibility. Driving requires 100% of your focus and attention. As teens, our job is to speak up when we see our peers speeding or driving recklessly. Don't continue to sit back and not speak up. Advocate for safe driving. Advocate for saving lives. The next time you're behind the wheel or riding with friends, I hope you remember Mr. Bubba's story. I hope you remember the consequences of his actions He lives with those consequences each and every day. He's advocating for safety. Let's join him. Be bold, speak up, and slow down. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much, Catherine, for such an empowering call to action for our teens in our state and even across the country. At this time, we will now open the floor for questions. So if you have a question, please type it in the comment section below this post. And we actually have some questions that have already been sent to us, and we're gonna work on those right now. So this first question is for Bubba, and it is from Claire in Shreveport. And it says, what profession were you in before the crash, and how did your crash affect your career goals and job?
Employed by a heavy equipment dealership, and I actually operated the equipment and unloaded the trucks and everything like that. And obviously, I couldn't do that anymore. Thankfully, it was a family business, not my family, but it was a family business. And so they gave me an opportunity to come back and start doing paperwork and phone work and all that. And which I was grateful for, because, you know, I had all these new bills, you know, these new expenses. You know, a lot of times people don't think about the financial impact. You know, my month stay with my surgeries in ICU was $500,000. My month stay on the rehab floor at the hospital was $185,000. So thankfully, my insurance absorbed most of those, but I still had my portions to pay for. And then I had all new expenses, you know, doctors' deductibles and copays and medical equipment and medicine and all of this stuff that I had to account for. So I was grateful to go back to work part-time, but at the same time, they couldn't bring me back as like a charity case. You know, I mean, they couldn't just kind of have me hanging around there part-time, just doing some stuff. So, So, excuse me, I had to learn a new trade, basically a new part of the business, and I pushed myself to do it and become educated as quickly as I could on the service end of it, the repair end of it. And so then I actually ended up going into the service department and becoming the service manager even over time. And I did that for all the way up until September of last year, when I finally became full-time here at Think First as program director.
And this question is for Trooper Scrants from Robert in California. In your years of serving, how often are car crashes caused by speeding? And are those crashes typically on highways or interstates?
That's a very good question, Robert. Thank you for it. In the percentage of fatalities that we have, I don't have an exact statistical number in it. From my personal experience, I investigated 7 fatality crashes when I was on the road, and 6 of the 7, the deceased was speeding. So that's a very high percentage in my personal experience. I've been on with state police now for almost 6 years. And in my year and a half of serving as a public information officer, I would say the vast majority of the crashes we see are due to speeding, impairment, and lack of seatbelt use.
Very good. Another question for Bubba from Jackie in New York. How did your crash impact your friendships and relationships?
That's an interesting question. Of course, everybody came to see me when I was in ICU and thought I might die. So everybody was still visiting me there. Actually, the one friend that called me on the way home that I went to hang out with is unfortunately no longer my friend. And that's because he couldn't face the guilt he felt every time he saw me, because he felt like he didn't step up and say something. Even though I told him it was my choices, I changed his life forever too. And then the impact on, you know, my family was the biggest. My wife, I know she had some resentment against me in the beginning because I changed our lives forever, you know. And it's something that is hard to explain, but I see it anytime that anybody in my family looks at me. I can just see a trauma in their eyes that changed them forever. and they see it every time they look at me, you know. And I know, one time I had my cell phone on silent a few years ago and forgot to tell my wife where I was going to be at and that I had my phone on silent. She couldn't reach me, and it automatically triggered that day all over again in her. So it's something that's always there. It's one day that I made those choices that has impacted them forever.
And Dylan, this question is for you from Megan in Ruston, Louisiana. How do you start a SADD chapter?
That's a great question, and a very complex, can be a very complex answer. So first, if you plan to be the advisor of your school's SADD chapter, you would need to complete your chapter registration by going into the SADD portal. And to access the SADD portal, visit www.la.sadd.org. Click Register My Chapter on the left-hand side of your screen, and that's a very easy process and allows you to input some information that's very vital for us to be able to get in touch with you and to better reach you. And also, we'll be able to better assist you because once you're registered, we'll immediately have your contact information. And so the first step would be to get registered in the SADD portal. Then, once you've registered yourself and your students, you'll have access to SADD's programs and all of SADD's opportunities. If you have a specific or a technical question, maybe things like student recruitment or talking to an administrator or specific SADD-related questions, or even an advisor training, if that's something that you'd be interested in, feel free to reach out to me directly. My contact information can also be found by visiting www.la.sadd.org, and just reach out to us there, and we can absolutely better assist you with starting a SADD chapter at your school. We'd love to see that take place there. So thank you. Okay, looking for another question. Let's see. Oh, another one for the trooper. It says, this is from Kim. I don't know where Kim is from. How fast over the speed limit does a driver have to be driving for them to be pulled over?
Well, that's a very frequent question I receive, especially on the spectrum I'm on now. But by the letter of the law, if you're going 1 mile over the speed limit, for an example, if you're going 46 and a 45, technically you're breaking that speed limit, right? That speed limit's in place for a particular reason, for the particular pitch on the road, what kind of intersection you're driving through and everything of that nature. But in all reality, I see a lot of speeding tickets that we write as state police as an agency. They're normally 10 miles per hour over, but I'm not saying, you can go 9 miles per hour over and not get a speeding ticket or not get stopped, because if you get involved in a fatality crash and you're 9 miles per hour over the speed limit and we pull the computer in your vehicle and we see that, there's going to be some liability on you when it comes time for a deposition and things of that nature.
And this question is also for Trooper Scrants again from Marcia and Walker. Is there a specific age group that is pulled over the most for speeding?
I believe everyone speeds. I can attest to that in my personal experience. I see a lot of late teenagers, 18 to 22 range, that do speed when I'm working speed details and things of that nature. And a lot of times they're on their cell phones. If they weren't on their cell phones, they would have saw me. I'm not trying to hide. I'm sitting in the middle of the meeting on the interstate, and they're looking down at their cell phones. And I work a lot of speed details at night, and once you see the glow of that cell phone on someone's face, clearly they're not looking at the roadway. That's one thing we see. I've actually stopped people who are watching Netflix, people who are watching Amazon Prime movies, and going 15 miles over the speed limit. So that's one thing that I can tell you. Traveling on any interstate system, you need to be a defensive driver, because you never know what the person next to you is doing.
Thank you. And we appreciate Mr. Bubba and Trooper Scrants for your insights, knowledge, and time to educate adults and teenagers on the dangers of speeding and other destructive decisions. I also want to thank Mr. Dylan Ivey for hosting this virtual press conference with these panelists today, to not only educate our state, but our nation to become more knowledgeable on how speeding impacts so many lives, and motivate our fellow citizens to speak up and slow down. Adults and parents, I hope you take this knowledge and educate your kids so they are responsible drivers and passengers. And my fellow peers, I truly hope you take this insight to heart And remember to be bold, speak out, speak up, and slow down.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We hope you've enjoyed this virtual experience. Be sure to keep in touch with us and visit us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for daily content as we work together to combat the 100 deadliest days of summer. You might just win a gift card or a prize just by engaging with us on social media. Remember to always speak up and slow down.